not shake the world, but you can shake somebody. And I don't want us to ever think, and this just comes out of American Christianity, cultural Christianity, that God honors retirement. Retirement from your vocation to God just means you're stepping up to full-time Christian service.
Amen.
So, I know that steps on some toes, but it's honest. And I only bring that up for this reason. We live in a time when a lot of Christians are going, not saying here, but you just hear them around, maybe you hear them in the media or social media or wherever, where they're just miserable. I mean, they know the Lord, but man, it's not as fulfilling as they thought it would be. They're missing a sense of purpose in life, and they're doing all they know to do. They're trying to be good people. They're being as moral as they can be and still sin 1,000 times a day. They go to church somewhat regularly. They get involved there every now and then. And it's just not working. It's just not paying off. And there's a reason for that. You're not going by the instructions. Now, I've told y'all, and I have to be careful if this gets on tape, because somebody might want, well, statute of limitations has run out in some states. But when I worked in the hardware store back in the early 80s, late 80s, boy, that's a long time too. But in the early 80s, I had to put bicycles together every year at Christmas. And so I'd pull those big boxes out, I'd rip those boxes open, there was just pieces everywhere. And I hated 10 speeds. And so I'd pull that thing out, there'd be a big old bag of bolts and nuts and pieces, and then I'd pull out that big old book of instructions. And I'd sit down and I'd just kind of thumb through that, and I'd say, I can figure it out. And I'd throw the instructions. I don't know why, but every time I put a bike together, I had pieces left over. I had bolts and nuts and things, and I would say, well, I guess they just give you a few extra pieces in case you lose something. Doesn't lead it. And so I don't know, I'd hate to know what happened to those bicycles after they sold. I have a feeling somebody would say, oh, Mama, thank you for my bicycle for Christmas. Boom. No, it just fell apart. But see, there's a good reason why that happened. I didn't go by the instructions. And see, the Christian life has instructions. And if we don't go by the instructions that were given to us by the designer, then we're going to have trouble. We're going to end up disappointed. Because the thing's just not going to work like it's supposed to. And that's what happens if we kind of settle into this cultural Christianity where life's all about propriety and you just kind of keep things in their place and don't get too overboard with anything in particular. And just kind of get it all balanced out just right so you can live the good life and kind of check out and haven't done everything you wanted to do. And that's foreign to the Scripture. In the Scriptures, we get a picture of what the Christian life's supposed to be about that goes beyond just being a good person. Now, it's great to be a good person. It's great to be a moral person. Even if you didn't know the Lord, it'd be great to be a moral person. It cuts down on a lot of the junk you'd otherwise have to deal with. But that's not the sum total of it. Going to church is important, but just going to church and being there, that's not it. That's not what God intended. In fact, if you read the Scriptures that deal with the church, it always describes a vibrant body where each member's doing something for the benefit of the other members. And it's you come here to be equipped to go out there to do the work of the ministry. You see, Ephesians 4 tells us that those who have been assigned to teaching or pastoral type roles in the church are not the ones who go out and do the work of the ministry. They're the ones who equip you to go out and do the work of the ministry. Now, when you start doing that, then you start living the Christian life by the instructions. And it starts paying off. Short of that, you're going to be miserable. And I think that's one reason why we have people today who say, well, I've tried this Christian thing, I don't really like it. It really didn't pay off like I thought it would, so I'm going to go do something else. and they're going through what's being coined deconversion. Deconversion means they walk away from the faith. The Bible calls it apostasy. You know, that sounds bad, so we just call it deconversion. So that's not what the Christian life is all about. In fact, I believe that if someone really starts living the Christian life like it was designed to be lived, they don't have to deal with doubts and unbelief very much. Temptations begin to drift apart. They begin to be less and less and less and less of a problem. You see, one reason why Christians have so much trouble with temptation is because how they're living is a magnet for temptation. You know, we can live in such a way that we're a magnet for temptation. If I go park my car in front of Krispy Kreme every day, I'm just inviting temptation. In fact, I'm not only inviting it, I'm opening the door for it to get in my car. So if I do something, I can act in such a way as to bring temptation to me. I don't want to live like that. I want to live by the design. And so God's given us the design, and we talk quite a bit about it here, but I just want to talk about one part of it today, if I could. In 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 3. And if I had to give this a title, it would be this: what do we have to lose? What do we have to lose? I mean, if we just haul off and say, you know what, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to advance the kingdom of God. What do you got to lose? Why not? So, 2 Kings 7:3. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. The city gate here being Samaria. A little background real quick. The Syrians are, in the Bible, they're called Aram. The Syrians have had an ongoing battle, ongoing war with the Israelites. And there's a lot of disagreement over why. If you read this, the couple of chapters prior to this, you'll read the story of Naaman. Now, Naaman was a general in the Syrian army. And the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, sent Naaman to Israel because he had heard that if people will go and treat the God of Israel, they'll be healed. Now, that doesn't mean that he was a God-fearing believer. Remember, he was a polytheist, and they believed certain gods could do certain things. And so he sends Naaman to Israel, to Samaria actually, to say, okay, sent him a letter and said, tell the king you're here to be healed. And so he gives the king the letter, and the king starts ripping his clothes and saying, how am I supposed to heal this guy? There's nothing supernatural about me. Well, the king was the son of Ahab and Jezebel. So if you remember Ahab and Jezebel, they were the 2 most wicked rulers Israel had. So the king rips his clothes off and starts throwing dirt in the air and says, what am I supposed to do? I can't heal this guy. And Elisha finds out about it, and he sends word and says, well, tell him to come over here and see me. So Naaman and all of his chariots and everything go over to see Elisha. And when they get there, his messenger goes up to the front door, knocks on the door, and Elisha's servant comes to the door, and he says, go tell your master Elisha, Naaman is here. And he needs for you to come out and heal him of leprosy. Well, Elisha doesn't go out. Instead, his servant goes back to tell Elisha, Naaman's here and he wants you to come out. Elisha says, you just tell him, go dip in the Jordan 7 times and he'll be healed. So the servant went back, told Naaman, he said, if you'll go dip in the Jordan River 7 times, you'll be healed. Naaman got angry. In fact, if you read the text in chapter 5, it says, Naaman said, well, I thought you would have at least come out and waved your arms and said something. I was looking for the magic show. And then he starts complaining, why do I have to do it here? Why can't I do this back home? And finally, there was a little servant girl who was traveling with him who had been captured, who was actually an Israelite, but she had been captured in one of the little border skirmishes and made into a servant. And she asked Naaman, "You've come this far, why don't you just do what he said?" So Naaman agreed, and he went down. Now, here's the thing about leprosy. Leprosy is a disease that, I really didn't know this, that you can be exposed to the bacteria that causes leprosy, and it may take 20 years before you see the symptoms. Did you know that? And once it starts, the skin turns pale, you have bumps, you have sores that pop up on your skin, the nerves in your hands, in your arms, in your feet slowly die, so that basically you're eaten up from the inside. So when somebody was declared to be a leper, that was it. They threw them out. They had to get outside of the city and live outside the city walls because they were unclean. In fact, they had to tell people who were coming close to them, unclean, unclean, stay away. So Naaman does his thing. He gets in that Jordan River. Don't you ever been in muddy water with sores? Did that feel good? I have a feeling when he dipped down that first time and came up, he went, "Ooh, that hurt." The second time, "Ooh, that didn't feel no better." But he kept dipping. That sixth time, I wonder if he thought, "Is this really going to work?" Because you know what? I have a feeling some of his men were probably up there on the bank like this, laughing, that he would be so humiliated like this. But he dipped that seventh time, and when he come up, he has the skin of a baby, skin of a young man. So Naaman gets excited, wouldn't we? He gets excited, and he goes back to Elisha's house, and Elisha comes to see him this time, and he tries to give Elisha a bunch of treasures and everything else, and Elisha said, "I don't want any of that." And then Naaman says, "I acknowledge that your God is the one true God." Great, right? But then Naaman has a thought, wait a minute. When I go back home, that's going to cause a problem. Because when the king would go in to worship the Syrian god of war, whose name was Rimmon, he expected all of his men to bow down to. And so he's foreseeing what was coming. He asked the man of God, "Will you please pray for me that God will have mercy on me when I have to do this?" Now, don't you think, if we heard something like that, we would say what? "Well, don't do it." You would think Elisha would have said that, but he did. All he said was, "Go in peace." Now, I have a feeling that when Naaman got back home, he may have bowed a couple of times, but I got a feeling before long, his confession became public knowledge. You know why? Because God always has a way of revealing secret disciples. People who say, "Well, I really love the Lord, but I don't want everybody to know that. It may cost me." And before long, it becomes common knowledge anyway. So I have a feeling some of that might have been playing into some of this desire of Ben-Hadad to go to war with Israel. And specifically, he was going to war with Elisha. If you read the narrative, he just wants to kill Elisha. Now, could have been that, but there's another reason why he wanted to kill Elisha, is he kept revealing to the king of Israel everything he was planning to do in battle. Because God would tell Elisha, "Okay, Ben-Hadad is going to have his men waiting to ambush you when you go to this certain place, so don't go there." And he got back to Ben-Hadad, none of his plans were working, and he wondered why. And they said, "Because Elisha keeps telling everything you're doing." So he issues a warrant for Elisha's head. He wants him executed. He wants him out of the way, and he feels like that will take care of his problem. So that's what leads up to this. They've encircled the city. They've laid siege to the city of Samaria. When they laid siege to a city, that means they cut it off from the outside world. No one was getting in. No one was getting out. Nothing was getting in. Nothing was getting out. And it got to the point that as people started dying inside the city, and as human waste began to accumulate, they couldn't get it out. And so not only did the food run out and they start to starve, but they also got sick off of the decontaminating bodies and human waste. Normally they would take that stuff out, but they couldn't. So it got so bad that people started eating their children. In fact, in chapter 6, the king is walking along the wall one day, and a lady comes to him and says, "Hey, you guys settle a dispute." And the dispute was over the fact that the day before they had eaten one woman's baby, and she had agreed to give her baby the next day for them to eat, and then she hid her baby. And the king is so angered by this, guess what he did? He blamed Elisha. So he blames Elisha for it. He wants Elisha dead. So now you got Ben-Hadad wanting Elisha dead. You've got the king of Israel wanting Elisha dead. And he sends his messenger to Elisha's house, and basically the messenger says, "Hello, I'm here to kill you." And Elisha gives him a word. He said, by this time tomorrow. Now keep in mind, they had gotten down to the point of eating people. They were selling donkey heads and dove dung at high prices. Now wouldn't you just love that for your meal tonight? What are we having tonight, baby? Well, we're having donkey head stew with a side of dove dung. And it was bringing premium prices. But Elisha told the messenger, "You go back and tell the king this time tomorrow they'll be giving it away. They'll be giving away flour. You'll have all the food you can want." Well, nobody believed it but Elisha. And even one of the king's advisors started laughing and mocking Elisha and said, "That wouldn't happen if God opened up the windows of heaven." And Elisha said, "You'll see it, but you won't taste it." Well, while all this is going on inside the city, there's something going on outside the city. And that's where these guys come into the picture. So 2 Kings 7, verse 3. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, "Why stay here until we die?" In other words, what have we got to lose? Let's do something. Now, have you ever felt like that? You ever felt like circumstances had so come into your life that it had got you backed into a corner you couldn't get out of, and while you're in that corner you can't get out of, you see a glimmer of hope. And you look at that glimmer of hope and you say, "Well, I could try that. May not work out. Probably won't. I'll probably fail." And what happens too often? We convince ourselves, just sit down and take what's coming. But they didn't. They knew what was coming, and so finally they said, "Tell you what, why are we sitting here waiting to die? Let's do something." So in verse 4, it says, if we say we will go to the city, the famine is there and we'll die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die. Well, how about that for options? If we go in, we die. If we stay here, we die. If we go over to the camp of the Arameans, there's a slight chance they won't kill us, but they probably will. So what have we got to lose? So they go. And when they get over to the camp, they find that the camp has been emptied. And the camp was empty because the Arameans heard the sound of horses and chariots coming, and they thought that the king of Israel had hired the Hittites and the Egyptians to come fight for him. And so they fled. In fact, they fled in such a hurry they left everything behind. So here comes these 4 lepers who walk into this encampment where everything was left where it was, and they start having a feast. Boy, they're eating food. Ooh, this is so good. And they're seeing gold and treasures laying all over the place, so they're filling their pockets full, and man, this is good. This is good food. I knew it'd pay off if we took a chance. But then after a while, after eating and after putting some things in their pockets, verse 9, they said to each other, what we're doing here is not right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. So let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. And the story tells us they did. And the next day, word spread that the Arameans had fled. The people rushed for the city gate. That official that had made fun of Elisha the day before was trampled by the crowd and died. And they went to the Aramean camp, got all the food they could want, all the treasure they could want, and they hauled it all back to Samaria. Great story, right? But it was only a great story because 4 men who were social outcasts asked the question, what have we got to lose? If we stay here, we're going to die. If we go back to what we know, what's familiar, which was life in Samaria, we're going to die. So why don't we just take a chance? Why don't we go see what will happen if we go into the Aramean camp? What do we have to lose? Well, from this story, I want to just give us 4 little things to think about. Number 1 is this. As with the Samaritans, people are desperate. People are desperate today. Like I said a minute ago, it's amazing to me how people are today, even people who claim to know the Lord are just so empty on the inside. They're looking for something that seems to provide purpose and meaning. And we'll try anything that will bring purpose and meaning. Any new fad that comes down, oh, let's try that and see if it works. And see, fads do offer a certain amount of purpose and meaning because fads promise that this is the solution to what you've been looking for. But the only problem is fads are high energy, but they burn through it quick. Y'all remember the Cabbage Patch Babies fad? Goodness, those were the ugliest dolls. And yet, when that was the fad, you had moms who were fighting over these dolls. They would go to stores where if they found out they had 2 of them that came in, 1,000 moms would show up and they'd fight over who got the 2. We had some in that little store I was telling you about. My boss actually bought those on a whim because when he went to market, they said, now these are going to be big this year. And he said, I thought they was the ugliest dolls I'd ever seen. And so he said, well, I'll try a few. We had people trying to bribe us to take away dolls that had already been promised to other people and let them have them, and they would pay us double the money. Cabbage Patch Babies. You could, boy, if one hit the shelf that year, I just wish I'd had a whole truckload of them that year. The next year, he bought a bunch of them, and he couldn't give them away. In fact, we did finally give some away, just to get rid of them. That's a fad. And see, some people hit the Christian life like that. they're not living it by the instructions, and so they just wait for a fad to come along, and they can jump on that bandwagon and enjoy the energy of it until the energy runs out, and then they have to jump to the next one. And jump to the next one, and to the next one. And they're always jumping from fad to fad to fad to fad to fad. Because they're, apart from being in something like this, their walk with the Lord is empty. Because they're riding a bicycle I put together. It wasn't put together right. And I don't even want to think about what happened to that Hot Wheel I put together, big wheel, whatever they call it. I had a lot of pieces left over with that one. All right, so people today are as desperate as they were then. Number 2, God used the unimpressive to bring deliverance. In other words, he didn't turn to the A list. He turned to the Z list. God used 4 men who were in such bad shape they had been thrown out of the city. And these 4 men who'd been in social isolation from everyone inside the city are the 4 who are going to bring about the deliverance for those people who are in the city who threw them out. You know what? God still uses unimpressive people. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 26 through 31 says, is where Paul reminds the readers that not many of them were influential, but that God chose them, those of low status, and those the world looked down upon to accomplish his purposes. Now, I know sometimes when you talk about unimpressive things, we sometimes may think of ourselves as being unimpressive because of our failures. Or we look at our lives and say, well, you know, I've got this problem, I've got that problem, God could never use me. Here's the thing. If God lays something on your heart to do, he's already decided you're qualified. God doesn't call people to do something and then change his mind later. He doesn't tell you, hey, I want you to go do such and such, and then say, wait a minute, I just pulled your file. Ooh, I didn't know that was in there. You better just have a seat over there somewhere. Just be thankful you're going to heaven is all I can say. If he lays something on your heart, you're qualified. So God used the unimpressive to bring about deliverance. Number 3, those God called had to decide they had nothing to lose. See, it's one thing for God to call you to do something, but it's another thing for us to actually do it. You know, God can tell people, I want you to go do such and such, and they may say, no, I don't think so. Now, they do so to their own peril, but they can do that. Danita and I are reading some books right now by Matthew Barnett, who is the head of the Dream Center in L.A. She's going out there this summer with a church group. So she said, well, we might ought to read the book and find out what all's going on. And so she's read the first one. I haven't read it about the church that never sleeps. But I'm reading the one about God giving people dreams. Not like sleeping dreams, but giving you a calling or giving you some type of a ministry to do. Excellent book. I encourage you to read it. But that's, when you read through that book, you're going to see story after story after story after story about people who realized they had nothing to lose. So they just struck out and did something for God. You're also going to read the story of when Matthew Barnett said he had had enough and he loaded everything in his little car and was going back to Phoenix. And he was having a good old-fashioned pity party. He said, driving down the interstate, and he stopped at a Dairy Queen, and God met him there. One thing to be called, it's another thing to answer the call. I heard Reinhard Bonnke, y'all remember him, the evangelist, just passed away not long ago. years ago, he set about to do a mission where he was going to send either the New Testament or a Bible to everyone in Germany or something. Then his plan was to cover Europe. And he was pushing it, and he was saying, oh, God, thank you so much for deeming me worthy of this. Thank you, Lord. And he said the Lord spoke to him one day and said, don't get prideful. You weren't my first choice. He said, in fact, you were number 3. The first 2 said they didn't want to do it and refused. It's one thing to be called. It's another thing to answer the call.
That's the truth, Bo.
So those God called had to decide they had nothing to lose. And when you think about those 4 men, remember how I described leprosy to you? They probably had sores all over them. So every step would have been painful. Has your foot ever been asleep or leg ever been asleep? How was the walking? Man, I bet that was some hard walking, especially across dirt. It was painful. And you know, sometimes when we answer the call of God, it can be painful. There's sacrifice involved. There's a cost involved. In fact, Jesus said what about if you plan to build a tower, do what first? You better count the cost. Because if you start building it and then stop, what's going to happen? You're going to become a laughingstock. No man puts his hand to the plow and looks back is worthy of me. And so that many times when God calls us to do something, we may do it for a little while and then we get tired of it and say, well, okay, that was fun for a while, now I'm going to go do something else. Don't do something else until God says to do something else. Now, if God tells you to go do something else, you can go free and clear and expect the blessings of God to go with you. But if we just decide to call ourselves to do something else, it won't go well. And I've seen that happen, especially with people who wanted to get into ministry, like pastoring or something along those lines. They feel like they get a word from God one day, blah, 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 you're going to do this, you do that, and they feel like that means tomorrow. And when it doesn't happen tomorrow, by the next week, they're going to make it happen. And like Abraham, when we try to make things happen, what happens? We get an Ishmael. And I like the way Dudley Hall puts it. He says, when you give birth to Ishmael, Ishmael still has to eat. So you just gave birth to something you're going to be taken care of for years to come. If God tells you to do something else, do something else. But doing what God calls us to do, at some time, there will be a cost involved. Number 4, those God called became the conduits for the survival of others. In fact, that's where he said, what are we doing? This isn't right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we do not tell them, punishment will come upon us. I love that phrase. This is a day of good news. Do we have any good news?
Yeah.
It's the what? The gospel. The gospel is good news. You know what? We have some other good news. Wisdom. Some of the people God will have you minister to are in bad need of wisdom. And God will give you the wisdom to share with them so that they can make the changes in their life they need to make. This is the day of good news. We've got it. But let's not overlook that second part. If we don't tell them, punishment will overtake us. So what kind of punishment overtakes us when we don't share the good news we have? Miss out on the blessing. How about this one? We lose joy and a sense of purpose in life. Right? You can always tell it when folks have closed up the conduit and they're no longer sharing what God's put in them. You see, everything God's given you is designed to flow out. We're supposed to be the Sea of Galilee, not the Dead Sea. But when we close the outlets, we become the Dead Sea. And there's no life around us. There's nothing in us that's living. And people can tell it. So we lose joy and purpose in life. A person who is holding on to the good news and won't share it becomes discontent and has a critical spirit. I can always tell when folks start going this way because they start nitpicking everybody. When what they're really doing is nitpicking themselves. But it's easier to throw that off on other people. They have a strained relationship with God, strained fellowship with God. Because God's given us the instructions for how to do this thing. And what we're telling God is, forget the instructions, I'll do it like I want to. And it doesn't work. Like my bicycles, didn't work. You have infighting. When you have a church that refuses, that closes the conduits and we're just going to be, like I've heard described, a social club. We're just going to get together and talk about sweet, sweet Jesus and have a lot of socials. They have a lot of infighting going on. You end up fighting about stuff that you shouldn't be fighting about, like the wattage of bulbs in the chandeliers.
Will they quit talking about Jesus?
Yep. Should we put a Coke machine in the building? All that spiritual stuff. And then the last one I put on my list of a type of punishment that happens is what I call a bloated spirit. Y'all know what a bloated spirit is? Bloated is how you feel when you leave the buffet. And when you leave the buffet, you're just like, oh, I don't care how good it looks in there right now, I couldn't eat another bite. And when Christians get that way, I don't know what that was. When Christians get that way, you're trying to stuff the word in their mouth, and they keep trying to stuff the word in their mouth and keep trying to stuff the word in them, but it never goes anywhere. And so they just get bigger and bigger. Y'all remember when a Western Steer used to be down here on the circle? We were in there one night, right before they went out of business, and I saw why they went out of business. But we were in there one night, and we had all our kids with us because kids could eat free. So if anybody had a restaurant where kids ate free, we went there. And there was this lady across from us, and she had a little boy with her. Not sure why, but for some reason she had loaded up his plate off of their buffet.
Because it was free.
And that little boy, he was so full, and she would say, "Eat it! Eat it! You got it, you eat it!" And that little boy, I could just look, I could see it in his eyes. I knew what was coming. "Eat it! Don't you waste that food, eat it!" And I was just sitting there thinking, oh, any minute now, it's going to be Mount St. Helens. So we got done, and we got all our stuff together, and we was kind of getting out of there as quick as we could. And on my way out, I glanced over and looked at the boy, and she had made him eat this noodle-looking stuff that had tomato sauce in it. So he had tomato sauce all over here. And when I looked at him, this was the look I got. I know what happened by the time he got to the car. But that's exactly what happens to us when we refuse to be a conduit of the good news we've been given. I can't take another sermon. think I'll lay out a few weeks and kind of let this settle down. If we're letting it flow out, you don't get like that. I thought of a term I could call it, but I'm afraid to. I think sometimes we get spiritual constipation. Because we're not. And that is one reason why people who know the Lord get to the place of saying, you know, I think I can just take a few weeks off and I'll be all right. Because they're not doing anything with what they got. So they have to give a little time for a little worldliness to come back in and kind of work that out of their system. So they can come back to church and hear about how they ought to do better. And then they, oh, see you on Easter. Last one. God has placed something in our hearts to do in order to share the good news we found with others. Don't think in terms of, okay, I'll tell you what, God spoke to me about doing such and such. So first I've got to put a board together, and then I got to get my NPO forms filled out, and I got to get my NPO. Oh, I'm going to get this official ministry up and going. Don't think like that. That's what we call inorganic. What you're doing is you're building a structure like on Field of Dreams, hoping they'll come. God works with organic ministry. Organic ministry is this. God tells you to do something, start with one person. And if it works with the one person, find another one person. And when it works with that person, go find another one person. I tell you what's going to happen. When you're willing to work with the one and you're faithful with the one, God sends you two. And when you're faithful with the two, God sends you three. And it just naturally grows into a quote-unquote ministry. So just start with the one person. God, what is it you want me to do here today? I'll do it. That's called organic ministry. Now, will there be opposition? I already told you, you can expect it. In fact, Matthew Barnett said the battle is not about perfecting everything immediately. The battle is about determining the direction God has called you to go and stay in the course until He tells you otherwise. As you fight the battle, realize not only that you're going to change and grow and learn, but also that God will teach you and lead you through the steps and through the missteps as well. Now, I think our church does an outstanding job in foreign missions. In fact, for the size we are, the amount we give to foreign missions is probably better than a lot of large churches. I have no doubt about that at all. And I think that's wonderful. We ought to support foreign missions. But let's not forget home missions. We got home missions too. There's things in this city that need to be done for the kingdom of God. And like I said, I'm not talking about going out trying to start something official. I'm just talking about starting where we are tomorrow or today. Lord, have me cross paths with somebody you want me to do something for. It starts there. That's organic. And when we're faithful with one, He'll give you two. Faithful with two, He'll give you three. Now, when I say home missions, I don't want you to just think, helping homeless folks. I'll be honest with you. We've got pretty good coverage of the homeless population today, ministry-wise.
That's true.
Okay? I tell you, where you won't have to worry about getting run over is to go visit folks in the nursing home.
That's right.
They're not going to run over you trying to get into the jail. They're They're not going to run over you just trying to go visit somebody that everybody else has forgotten. They're not going to, they can do something as simple as, like's happened to me on many occasions, walking through the Sounds parking lot. God says, go help that person with their stuff. People aren't going to run over you and say, no, let me do it. But see, sometimes we don't want to do that because we're thinking, big ministry. But if we haven't handled the one yet, we don't need the big ministry. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not saying don't get involved in the homeless population if that's where you want to work. There's some great ministries in Dothan that are already doing it. I'm saying just be open to whatever it is God tells you to do. I had a lady this week come in our building, and she asked the secretary, is there anybody here who could counsel some women I have living in my house who are all battered wives? And she has a ministry. It's not very big. She understands organic. She started with 1, then it went to 2, and then it went to 3. And she, is there anybody here who can work with these ladies because they really need some help? And the manager came. I heard her coming down the hall. Dr. Grice. I said, yes. They always do that when they want something. She said, there's a lady here who wants to talk to you about counseling some women who are living in her house. I said, send her in. So she came in, very nice lady, got to know her. I'm going to get to know her better. I didn't even know she had this going. And it's an own private thing, and this isn't an NPO or anything. She just did it. She closed her business and opened this house. And she's telling me a little about the ladies who were living with her. She said they really do need help, but they don't have any money. I knew immediately, okay, I know where they're going in. And I said, bring them in Monday. She said, you'll see them? I said, yeah. They don't have any money. So, she broke down in tears. You see, what I found out is there's a lot of people in Dothan who need counseling who don't have any money and no insurance, and they can't pay for it. And they have nowhere to get it. New Hope does a great job with a lot of them, but they're full. And so, guess what I've heard God saying lately? You're up. And so, structurally, I'm trying to make some changes to my business so that I can get some grant money to help cover the cost of seeing these people, and they can come, and as many of them as they want to can come for free. In fact, I am going to be part of one grant that's already in the works for that purpose. Except this one focuses on homeless people. I'm doing the counseling for the art. Now, was that where I thought I would be years ago? No. I mean, I had visions of nice sports car, life pretty easy, everything real cool and slick, and money, $100 bills falling out of my pocket. Oh, well. But that's not God's plan. So what's God's plan for you? He's got one. If you're still here, He's got one. It may not be nothing big and grandiose. And then again, it might be. The little lady I told you about who was Dudley Hall's Sunday school teacher. Couldn't drive, with a woman. And she said, I can't drive, but if you'll bring those boys to my house, I will teach them every week. So every week, they took 5 boys to her house for Bible training. 4 became preachers. One of them was Dudley Hall. and the other one was his brother. You never know what God will do if we'll just hear His voice. Instead of thinking about all the reasons why it's going to fail, say, what have I got to lose? I'm going for it. Mm-hmm.
When God started moving in my life, it was a shock to me. I gotta take a look at me. I'm 4 foot something. You know, I'm overweight. Give me a break here. 4 kids, business, husband that was not feeling good. And God just started sovereignly moving in my life. One of the first things He told me, so I'm really just seeking God. What do you want me to do with this? You know, I was teaching Sunday school, teaching the youth, y'all know that. But I went to, of all places, Winn-Dixie for my mother. And I got there, and this lady was walking up and down the aisle, and she was pitiful, okay? She just was. She was not dressed good. Obviously, she did not feel good, you know, and God said, you need to pray for her in Winn-Dixie. And I said, I don't want to do that. I mean, I fought it through the entire Winn-Dixie. I went out and got in my car and drove off. And God said, you got to go pray for that lady. Turned back around, parked my car, and I went and found the lady. She's still trying to go up and down the aisle. And I said to her, would you mind if I pray for you? I didn't know what she needed. She said, I would appreciate that. Because obviously she didn't feel good, that was obvious. But I didn't ask her what was wrong. I just prayed for her, God to bless her, and show Himself to her, and all that. And I said, and I want you to have a wonderful day, and gave her just a little hug, and left. Do I know what happened to her? No. Did lightning strike? No. But was I faithful to do that? That's what I tried very hard to be. I was shaking like a leaf when I got in the car because I was so scared, okay? But what Bo says is right. If you'll try it with one, then all of a sudden God will show you somebody else to pray. But that first time was